don't think it was ever a matter of is it the right decision. It was more of is it the right time for it. Just because we've got 2 sets of twins, 4 small kids at home, and some of those times it was like.
Yeah, you look pretty rested with all of that, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a good front there.
Yeah, well, no, you're doing a good job at that.
Welcome back to another episode of the Whiskey Stop. So you actually just headed over to Warsaw, Indiana?
Warsaw, Indiana. I've driven through Warsaw before, never stopped there before, but this time I thought I'm going to stop and look around because they've got a great distillery there, and I found out a few things while I was there. One, it's the orthopedic capital of the world. How about that?
That's pretty cool. A lot of medical devices being made in Warsaw.
That's right. Sometimes when you need a medical device, it just may come from Warsaw, Indiana. And while there, a very special birthday celebrated. Well, the day right before, but you're going to find out about that in just a minute.
Yep, and this is Streven Distilling Company, so let's check it out.
Today, we find ourselves at a craft distillery in Warsaw, Indiana. We're going to see what they have inside, and I think we're going to have a little taste. The Miller family, who owns and operates a medical device business, started Streven behind their company's manufacturing facility. Releasing their first clear spirits in 2018, Streven is currently aging their first barrels of bourbon. This is Mitch Miller, owner and operator of Streven Distilling Company.
We started in 2016. It's obviously a small area, small footprint in here. We have bourbon that we've been distilling, and we have our vodka and gin currently out. But we're obviously excited about our bourbon, which is still a few years away yet.
Right. Well, I know right behind you, you've got a couple of barrels, or more than a couple, that are going to have a birthday tomorrow.
Yeah. So with to be a straight bourbon, it has to age in the barrel for 2 years. So we were just looking at the dates, and those were filled on, I think it said June 18th, which would be tomorrow. So tomorrow they will be a straight bourbon, but we'll try those today, I guess, before it's a straight bourbon.
Okay, awesome.
So our vodka, we came out with that, I think, in 2018. So we've had it out for a couple years now. And then the gin was about 6 months behind. It just took a little while longer to get that recipe tweaked. So yeah, we've had those out for a while now, and most of the places we have are local that carry that.
Okay.
We've got a few places down as far as Indianapolis, but kind of, our goal when we started the distillery was really to cater to kind of our backyard, which is Kosciuszko County. So.
And I suppose if you want to spread out later, you can always do that, but take care of your home base first of all.
Yeah, and that was kind of our point, that if we can't get our local community kind of behind us, if we don't have a good product, that there's really no point in trying to expand beyond that. So that's been our goal from the beginning. Our distributor's Indiana Small Batch. Toby Blake is the owner there, so he's really good about. He's got a lot of relationships with the on-premise and off-premise locations where, he works with those guys to get our spirits into different places.
When did you sell your first bottle of vodka and gin?
Yeah, it was June, I think, of 2018. I know it was June because we kind of had a golf outing that we were sponsoring and kicked it off there. And then we did a tasting over at Service Liquors East here in Warsaw. So that was kind of our first bottles that we sold over there. We have our artisan permit, which would allow for tastings. So our area here is not really set up for a tasting room. We do some, we'll post some events that we do throughout the year around the holidays where people can come in and buy some merchandise and do some tastings and see the distillery, because that's a request we get a lot. People want to see where it's made. But when we started the distillery, it was really kind of our business plan and our intent that we would not have a tasting room. A couple of reasons behind that. One, we're just, both my wife and I are busy with day jobs that we just didn't think that we could do that. But we really also wanted to kind of make this focused on working with our other local on-premise locations and never be perceived as a competitor, where if we were going to open a tasting room and have, where we'd potentially be pulling business away from, from their customer base. In the beginning, there were a lot of long weeks of getting this ready to go. And
was this scary to start up as a business?
I don't think it was ever a matter of is it the right decision. It was more of, is it the right time for it? Just because we've got 2 sets of twins, 4 small kids at home, and some of those times it was like,
yeah, you look pretty rested with all of that, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a good front there.
Yeah, well, no, you're doing a good job at that. Gin, I find that interesting because you have that out that you can buy as well as the vodka.
Exactly.
But gin's an interesting product, I think.
It is.
Different botanicals. Was there a lot about gin you had to learn to?
Yeah, I would say it was not as easy as I thought it was going to be to kind of dial in a recipe. The other thing that I found was that my particular taste, what I like in a gin, may not necessarily be what the market likes. So when we were developing our gin recipe, we reached out to some of the local restaurants in town and had some of their bar managers come and sample some of our trials that we were doing and give their feedback. So again, I tend to really kind of like a little bit more of a citrus,
right?
Where
the juniper's more in the background and doesn't hit you in the face quite so hard. So
I would call it maybe a less assertive gin. But in talking with some of the bar managers that came through, they kind of thought, well, it's interesting, this one that's very citrus forward, but I don't think your average gin drinker that's going to come to our restaurant and want a gin, that may not be to their taste.
Because they want something that's really says
gin.
Yeah,
that they expect. Yeah. So I think we found a balance. We have, I would call it a lighter, body gin, where it's not the pine from the juniper just kind of hits you in the face right at the beginning, but it's also, I think, appeases the gin fans out there. So we've had really good feedback with our gin.
Now, your love for bourbon and appreciation, when did that start in your life? Because you're not going to do this unless you really appreciate what's in that glass.
I had some people introduce me to Scotch. So I kind of started drinking that, and then as I got into the bourbons more, I tended to kind of gravitate towards that sweetness of bourbon a little bit, and I really liked it. There's a lot of good bourbon out there, and a lot of it is aged in the traditional 53-gallon barrels.
Right.
So I thought, why try to kind of reinvent the wheel if that works, and there's a long history of that working, that we wanted to kind of replicate that. So that was one of the reasons. I also think we're fortunate to be in our space here, where we don't have a really burdensome lease or anything like that. And because my wife and I still work, we can kind of be a little more patient with it. And in a big traditional 53-gallon barrel, it does take longer to age.
Right.
So we're not necessarily kind of under the gun to release a bourbon quickly to generate that cash flow. So. Our intent is to let these go as long as until they're ready. So that's probably going to look like at least 5 years. So as we talked about, we've got some 2-year product back there tomorrow. It'll be 2 years, and then we're going to see. We're going to go definitely at least 4 years, and then probably 5 and beyond. And then we've got some barrels back here marked that are going to sit longer as well. Before we've got some MGP barrels back here. Those will not be branded under our distillery name. These are private barrels that we have for companies that have, we call it a barrel adoption agreement. So they'll private label these, under their business name, and it'll be kind of a nice gift or thing for customers.
MPG, explain that to us. A lot of people know about that. A lot of people have no idea about that.
MGP is a large distillery in southern Indiana, and what a lot of people don't know is the small kind of craft distilleries is really what they're doing is sourcing their bourbon. So they or rye, they purchase it from MGP, and they bottle it at their facility, and then basically come up with their marketing on it and backstory, whatever they want to do. So a lot of people didn't know about that. A lot of people still don't know about that. But as that became more, I guess, popular, and as craft distilleries started to pop up, people became aware, and in some ways, kind of, once they were aware of what was really going on, I wouldn't say it gave MGP a bad name, but people kind of got a bad taste in their mouth that they thought they were getting this bourbon that was all crafted at the distillery, and then kind of came to find out that it was distilled in Indiana.
There's a lot of big bourbon names out there.
There are.
That go MPG.
Yeah, they're
and that's fine because that's not where all the magic is happening anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot. And I will say that MGP, they make a good product. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, there's nothing you have to fix with.
No. Yeah. I think it's just I think people get turned off when there's kind of that lack of transparency that they thought they were getting one thing, but it come to find out it was something different. So I always tell people everything along the wall here is not our bourbon. We're not going to sell that as our bourbon. These are private barrels. But what we will offer to the public is back here on the racks, and that's what we've distilled here. It's got to be a dedicated gin still.
Okay.
When I first got into this, and I was asking talking with other distillers, they'd kind of said, once you put the botanicals in a still, and you've got all the oils from the juniper and everything, a lot of other distilleries were like, hey, you probably want to have a dedicated gin still.
Because that's going to...
Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning out in between.
Right. So this makes sense.
So it does. But actually, I've ended up using it for, kind of in the theme of doing kind of a traditional, 53-gallon bourbon, barrels. One of the things I do on the still over here, it is a column still, so it's got the plates that we can put in there, the modular plates to increase the proof. And so you could do this, you could do bourbon in a single pass in this by adjusting the plates that you've got in there, so we could put up to 4 plates in. And I did some of that with some of the early runs of bourbon that we did, but what I found, and my personal taste anyway, is that we basically do two separate distillations of our bourbon. So that's, again, more of kind of the traditional, big distillery Kentucky style. So we use this basically, there's no plates. We do a stripping run. So in that stripping run, all we're really trying to do is extract the ethanol out of the mash at that point. So it comes out, we're not making any heads cuts, tails cuts. We just basically getting the ethanol out. So it's a pretty low proof, around 60 proof, 30%.
Okay.
And that it works out pretty well because this is a 150-gallon still. We get around 25 gallons of the low wines, you could call it. And then at that point, then we do put it in the small still, and then we do a second distillation at that point.
Bourbon drinkers, we've all had the brand names that we are aware of, and you can look on the shelf. Yeah, I've seen that. So it's just the people that do it in this size of operation, I think this has a real draw to it. People want to taste, let's see what these guys have. And it puts you in a whole different section than the big guys in Kentucky.
Well, and I think smaller towns, like Warsaw, we're not a real big place here, but I think it's interesting for people. They can go to a brewery or a distillery and they can actually see where it's made, meet the people that make it. For the most part, we all kind of know each other. So, I think that I think that's kind of a trend that we're seeing, that, people like to buy local. They like to know where it's coming from.
Tell me a little bit, how do the labels come to be? Because that's pretty eye-catching.
It is. So when we started the distillery, we actually... we were trying to think of a name, and our original thought was to have something with oak in the name, just because of bourbon. Sure. Come to find out, a lot of other distilleries before us had that same idea, so we thought we would avoid that. And we came across this name Streven, which means to strive in Dutch, and we thought that was a pretty cool name. Gavel is borrowed from Latin gemellus, which has a meaning of twin behind it. And since we have 2 sets of twins, we thought, well, Gavel would be a kind of a cool name for gin. When it came to design, we worked with a company out of Michigan called the Media Advantage. So they designed the labels, and then we just had those printed by a separate company there. But everything is rolled on by hand, like a lot of small distilleries. When you get into the automated equipment, one, we don't have the volume to justify that, but it's also pretty expensive. So
I got
a lot of hand labeling.
I saw your labels over there. I thought, ooh, cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so vodka, you want nice and clean.
Yep.
And obviously. Wow.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, that's scary good.
Yeah, it goes down a little too good.
That could be dangerous.
Yeah.
That's as clean as any vodka I've ever tasted in my life. Now the gin again. So many ways, so many different ways you can put those botanicals together.
Exactly, and so we kind of experimented with a couple different. You can distill gin a couple ways. Gin starts out with basically the same neutral spirit as the base that a vodka would. And you can either do a maceration technique, which means you would basically put all the botanicals into the boiler of the still, and then you can let it sit for 24 hours or so before you distill it. So picking up those oils and things from the juniper and other botanicals. Or you can do a vapor infusion technique, which is what we ultimately decided on. Vapor infusion tends to give a little bit lighter of a gin, a little less assertive. So how that works is you put the neutral spirit into the boiler, and then as the vapors of that passes through, it comes up through. Yeah, so we've got a gin basket on our small still.
Well, that's pretty easy to drink too. Yeah. See, would you drink? You could just drink this neat, or put a small cube in there if you wanted to. It's that approachable.
Yeah. Some of the local places we have here in town, they make some really good cocktails with our gin too. So
that's marvelous. Both of these, congratulations on.
Thank you.
On both of those.
Yeah.
Nice product. Yeah. Mitch, then let me try a sample of Streven's bourbon straight from the barrel. What we're tasting today will have its 2-year birthday party tomorrow.
Tomorrow, exactly.
So I got to this just before.
That's right.
Which is okay, because I wouldn't have thought to bring a present for it. I don't know what you give a 2-year-old bourbon, but again, explain what we're going to have right here.
Yeah, so that's again, tomorrow it'll be a straight bourbon. So traditional, I would call it maybe kind of a traditional mash bill. It's higher corn, so a little bit sweeter. It's a 75% corn in the mash bill, 21% rye. And then obviously the malt in there.
Yeah, I can sense the sweetness.
Yeah. So it's a pretty sweet bourbon there. As I mentioned, barrel entry proof is 110, so slightly lower on the entry proof.
Lower than what some people use.
And it's still a young bourbon now, so you're going to get some of that harshness that you'd have, kind of in a new make. But you can see even at 2 years, it's picked up some color.
Yep.
It's already got some of the caramel notes that you would expect from a bourbon. That the char on the inside of that barrel.
I always think what I find most interesting here, and then I'm going to quit talking so we can taste this, is, it goes in clear.
Yeah, exactly.
And look what it's pulled out of the barrel in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. A lot of people don't know that everything that comes off the still is perfectly clear.
Yeah.
It gets all of its color from the char on the inside of the barrel. So the barrels, as we talked about, 53-gallon barrels. It's a char level 4, which is a heavy char.
It's a heavy char.
Heavy char in there, which also again gives you some of that sweetness there, just because of.
Do you use the number 4 char on all your?
We do.
barrels?
I've got a couple level 3s in here, but most everything is a char level 4 there.
Ooh, I like that, and I can tell the rye's in there too.
Yep.
Which I think that's nice. What's your percentage of corn again?
75%.
75 and 21% rye, which
Yep.
is a nice mash bill, I think.
Yeah. So it's still got, you feel that heat on the back end. That's still, I think coming from that, it's a younger bourbon still. Yeah. So, over the next few years, that's going to kind of continue to mellow out, pick up some more flavor. That's
a nice 2-year-old.
Yeah, we've got, I've got a barrel up in the corner there that's kind of our family barrel that I've marked, and that one may be a 10-year bourbon. So that one may be that we use to celebrate some milestones for our kids. And
wouldn't
things
that
like
be
that.
Great?
It would be. Yeah. That's kind of the we've got all their handprints on it.
Is that what that is?
Yeah,
all the kids' handprints. That's wonderful.
So weddings, graduations, things like that.
Isn't that nice?
They might not be old enough to enjoy it yet, but I will be. You know.
Well, that was a really cool profile on Streven Distillery there. And also, for his own private label customers, he's actually using some of the juice that comes out of MGP Distillery in Indiana.
Right.
Now, not to be confused with, as you mentioned in the video, MPG Distillery.
Yeah. So he explained MGP for some of those special barrels. I said MPG. MPG is miles per gallon. I was sidetracked by thoughts of what my mileage was on my car, so that was my bad. I do know better about bourbon and whiskeys anyway. if
does
nothing
make a lot of
else.
sense. So-
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense.
But it was pretty cool. So they're not selling their whiskey yet. They're still in the aging
Yeah.
process. It just had that 2-year birthday since we've been there now, which
Right.
is really awesome. Was it good whiskey?
It was good. 2-year whiskey. It was great. He puts the whiskey thief in there, takes some out, and as you saw in the video, got to try it. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
And by the time it has 2 or 3 more birthdays, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal.
Yeah, we're going to look forward to that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
since we don't have the whiskey to taste today, though,
Right.
we did pick up some of the gin.
Yeah, some of the gin. Of course, they make vodka and the gin. I'm more of a gin guy. Gin's been around forever. And for those who were younger, or you don't think you like gin because of that upfront juniper taste, this is great. This is a vapor infused. He's got some great botanicals in there. The juniper is still in there, but it's not as forward. So if you're a little scared of gin or it just seems a little too strong for you, I think this one you're going to like. So I'd say let's take a taste,
that.
okay?
Yep.
And gin, in any drink you're ever going to see gin, it's always in a chilled state. So we'll do that. You're not as quite familiar with gin as your dad is here, huh?
I'm not, but
So you
I
can
have started to enjoy it a bit more.
yeah, and I love a good gin and tonic too.
Is that your favorite?
So
way to do
that's
gin?
my favorite way to do gin, is a gin and tonic. And anyway, see what you think. But it's on the lighter side, floral, as a lot of people say with different drinks. This one is very approachable. Somebody had been into this too. I don't know who was drinking this. Might have
The
been
cat?
me. Yeah, the cat. Well, that cat and I are going to have words. See, you can actually just sip this if you wanted to, and chilled. It's very nice, and it does make a wonderful gin and tonic, or a gimlet, or whatever gin drink you might prefer. But it's definitely worth a taste if you see it on the shelves. I highly recommend this one. And might I say, Streven, for a little taste of heaven. I just made that up. You can use it if you want.
That's pretty cool.
All
I
right.
like that. But as you did mention there. Okay, what was that you kicked?
It might. It
Yeah,
just
what
fell,
is it?
it just fell over forward.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, now that we got things under control on the set,
Right.
we had to bring the crew in real quick to kind of clean up that mess. So
Yeah, we need the production teams. It's hard to find a good production team these days. Anyway,
But
what do you think, though?
I think
Nice,
it's
isn't it?
excellent. Like you said, I have not had nearly as much experience with gin. I'm finding, especially like in the summer months, this is really refreshing and
That's-
nice to have sitting out on the porch, and chilled just perfect right here.
I tell you,
So,
imagine that with a lime and a nice fizzy tonic water underneath, with a nice cube in the middle. You got yourself a nice little sipping drink out there in the patio or wherever you might be.
sounds good. I think that would be a good idea. So
I do too.
we'll let these folks get back to the rest of their day. We thank you for joining us today, and we thank Streven as well for hosting and letting us come check things out. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and until next time,
Cheers.